We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roger, planet.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside FD off. Bring in FD off. It's orange!
Orange 25!
Oh my god!
Oh my god!
Decollage!
What is it?
Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You good? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of NSF Live, where we will be discussing some awesome topics here and taking your questions all about them. I will be your host for today. I am Sawyer Rosenstein, and joining me, we have a veritable team of fantastic people. We have with us Mr. Alejandro Alcantarilla Romero. Alex, how are you doing today?
I didn't know you were Jack, but yeah, I'm doing really, really great here. Yeah, I don't know. It's so exciting because it's like so many topics to cover today.
Oh yeah, let's see. Beard, bacon. Is that better? Also joining us, Trevor Nick. Trevor, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Sawyer. There a lot of exciting things are coming up in the world of spaceflight that'll be fun to discuss with y'all.
Oh, that is for sure. And the person pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, and initiating flight mode is Patrick Cahoon. So thank you to our awesome team that's joining us today, and you for watching. We have some really cool topics today. I mean, we've got Falcon Heavy getting ready to launch. We've got the Starship destack, and maybe some speculation about that. And a bunch of mega-constellations that are now in orbit. And do we really need them? So it's going to be interesting. Now, if you have any questions about any of these topics, you can tag us at NASASpaceflight, and we will do our best to answer as many of them as possible. What we do ask is if you can try and keep the question to that particular topic, because we will be getting to Starship, I promise that. But, you know, if we're talking about, I don't know, our first topic, say Project Kuiper, we'll keep the questions towards that, which I'll kick us off with that topic, if you guys don't mind. And that was just a few days ago, October 6th, the first Protoflight for Project Kuiper lifted off from the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station aboard the final 501 configuration of the Atlas V rocket. That lifted off at 2:06 p.m. Eastern Time, 18:06 UTC. Now, those two satellites went into a 500-kilometer 30-degree inclined orbit in low Earth orbit, and everything so far has been successful with it. Now, these are going to be the pathfinders for what will eventually be Amazon's big internet constellation, which might actually be a competitor now to Starlink, especially as they get more satellites in orbit. Right now, they have, I believe, over 3,000 satellites that they're planning to place into orbit, and these are the two initial ones. Now, they've got a lot, obviously, to keep up with here, especially with SpaceX, with 3 Starlink launches this coming week here, starting with one later tonight even, Eastern Time. So it's a really interesting thing now that we're getting all of these other internet constellations in low Earth orbit. Because we've had other people that have done the internet satellites in a geostationary orbit or in higher orbits, but now we really kind of have these two competitors here, especially with the first proto ones in orbit now, because again, prototype flight, Protoflight. Very clever on the naming there. Now, I think the big question here is, do we really need all these mega constellations, or are we just putting all this trash in low Earth orbit? Because I know obviously competition is something, but Alex, I want to start with you on this one. Since you've been following all of the numbers and everything with how many Starlinks have been launching and all of that, do you think that it's good now that we have Amazon trying to compete as well?
Well, I guess it depends, right? One could think that having a monopoly in space and having just one single company must not be good because you want competition, right? You want things to be driven by that competition in the market. But it is also true that in this market we have a lot of satellites in space and coming together very closely and things like that. It is true though that it's been what 4 years since Starlink first launched, and we haven't had any accidents yet. And knock on wood, there, we don't have any other accidents or anything like it. Actually, if you look at the statistics of what are the things that are get hit by debris and things like that, it's usually about things that are tumbling that don't have any control by themselves. Whereas the Starlinks, Amazon's Kuiper satellites, OneWeb satellites, all of them have their own propulsion systems. They have their guidance, etc., right? So they are able to maneuver. And so if there's any piece of debris, and we know about it well ahead of time, then these satellites can move out of the way and obviously avoid it. The problem is obviously the more satellites there are, the more chances these things are going to occur. So obviously there's higher chances, but it is also true that they are controllable satellites. And so there's this balance here where you're trying to put a capability in space, such as internet satellites, and obviously not be just one single company, again, because of the whole monopoly thing. And if you think about it, obviously SpaceX seems to be going with good intentions, right? It's not something that at least we've seen, um, that they don't care about things in general. Like for example, they have had issues with the brightness of the satellites, and they've tried to correct that. They have had issues with when they pass over certain places where they do, for example, radio astronomy, and so they have turned off the satellites as they go above that, for example. So they try to at least minimize the damages, so to speak, of having these many satellites up there. But obviously, if there's a player that doesn't want to go by those rules, you're like, oh my gosh, right? You kind of want to have some kind of regulations for those that don't play that nice. And so having multiple companies, multiple competitors up there, that also makes them be, for example, for this mission, we saw a lot of secrecy from Amazon, which probably put a lot of criticism into them, because we see OneWeb, they're very clear what they're doing. They publish, a lot of the information out there to satellite tracking sites. Starlink does the same. But then Amazon launches, and we don't even have coverage of satellite separation or like what is gonna be the timelines. So just by their companies themselves being what they are, that can drive a lot of the public perception. And so I think it's a whole discussion here that I'm standing a lot here, but it is truly multiple facets are in all of these conversation. I will say, yeah. I don't think it's trash though.
Well, one man's trash is another man's treasure. But no, I agree with you on that. It's, I mean, there's obviously a need for it. The fact that you have all of these companies now, like you mentioned, you've got Starlink, you've got OneWeb now, you'll have Kuiper, trying to get internet to these places that may not have it. So it's obviously necessary. I guess the question is in terms of the competition itself and, hi Jake, and space junk as well as concern. Trevor, I'm going to put this one to you then. What do you think? Do you think that this is creating a little too much space junk, or is this worth it for the service it provides?
That's a very difficult question to answer, in my opinion. Because like you were saying, it very obviously has huge benefits to life here on Earth. And enabling people to have internet everywhere will be a huge thing and could be, could change the world for the better and give people access to things that they haven't had access to before. However, the serious concern that we need to keep into account is, will this lead to a lot of space junk up there? And to my knowledge, Amazon has not been as transparent so far about how they plan to handle some of these satellite deorbits and whatnot, and how they plan to retire, when SpaceX was very upfront with that on Starlink. So like Alex was saying, there has been some weird secrecy around this launch, and I would very much like for Amazon to come out and answer some of these questions to hopefully make it clear that they are doing a net good thing. But I think overall, it will be a good thing. The other big thing that will be interesting to see is how reflective they are compared to Starlink, right? SpaceX has worked very hard with the astronomy community to reduce the uh, amount of light that their satellites reflect back down to Earth, which can interfere with some ground-based and even low Earth orbit-based astronomy. Um, so yeah, they're all questions that I really wish Amazon would answer, and sadly, we don't have good answers to right now.
And Robert Simmons actually asking that question. I'm sorry I can't pull them up. My cat is now on top of my mouse. Ironic. But Robert asking, do you think that they learned from SpaceX on reducing their reflective nature of their satellites? And like you said, we really don't know that much about it. Do we, Alex?
I don't think so. And frankly, there's a lot of other companies out there. I saw recently there's this company launching, I think it is called AST Space Mobile. I think it's the name. They are launching these big direct to cell satellites for connectivity directly to your cell phone. And they have these big, massive reflector antennas on these satellites on low Earth orbit, and they are super bright, like among the brightest things that you can see with your naked eye. And it's like they have only launched one single test satellite, and I think they said it was like somewhere around magnitude 0, magnitude 1, which to be comparable with some other things that you can see in the sky, it's similar to the brightness of, for example, Mars or things like that. So it is something that you can see with your naked eye if you know where to look at. Um, these company, for example, plans to launch hundreds of these, and this test satellite is a small prototype. So the full version ones are going to be way larger. So we're talking about potentially these kind of satellites not being really that good. If you think about it, this is probably that company. Yeah, that is the one. Now, I'm not saying they're not going to solve it, right? But it is also true that, for example, in their case, we haven't really seen anything, right? And then there's, Amazon as well. Haven't said anything. OneWeb, apparently, they did have something, not to the public, but with astronomers. So at least, they address the people that gonna be basically affected by it. And then SpaceX has been known to publish, regular updates in their website, and also go into different astronomy groups and things like that to be able to get feedback on what they are doing. And definitely seems like the Starlink V2 mini satellites, even though they are larger than the other ones that they were launching prior to that, it seems like they are fainter. So it's doing wonders so far. But we'll look at, maybe when they launch larger satellites, or even when they launch their own direct to cell connectivity satellites. That's probably when we're going to be like, ooh, these are way larger. So we'll see what happens with that.
And for those unaware in terms of magnitude, the higher the number, the dimmer it is. So the fact that it's magnitude 0 is actually surprisingly bright. If you've ever seen the International Space Station pass overhead, that's usually about magnitude of -3 or -4. So just for kind of a reference there as well. And we've seen the trains of these Starlink satellites flying overhead. So it might be interesting to see if we end up getting the Kuiper trains as well.
Yeah, and for reference, the Starlink satellites, when they are deployed, they are usually about magnitude 3 or thereabouts. They are very faint from a city. I actually saw one of them a couple of months ago, and they are super faint from here from the city. But if you go to the outskirts and things like that, then you start seeing them in better clear view. But once they go into their operational orbit, they reach the latest data shows that it is about magnitude 7, so it's actually out of eyesight. You cannot see it with your naked eye. You need some binoculars or a telescope or something like that to be able to see them.
Yeah, or long exposure photography, which is why there's always been the concerns with astronomers who
Exactly.
need to do those longer exposures. In regards to the constellation itself, we have a question here from Paul asking, how long will it take to launch all of Project Kuiper? And I don't think we really have a good answer, because at this point, I mean, heck, we're still launching Starship, and they've now launched over 5,000 of them. And based off of their orbits, I mean, eventually they're going to keep deorbiting, right, Trevor?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And the only kind of data point that we have for this is the FCC gave Amazon until July of 2026 to get half of their constellation into orbit. And that, right, is just over 3,200 satellites. So by then they have to get 1,600 in orbit. So from there we can kind of try to back out a launch cadence, but we don't know how many satellites are going to have on each of their operational flights. And nor do we know, what launch vehicles will be available sooner than later, since right now they have several more launches planned on the Atlas V, and then they have a bunch of launches planned on Vulcan, and then after that some on Arianespace, and some more on New Glenn. So when those vehicles will be ready will be another interesting question for this constellation.
There you go. Just answered 2 questions there from chat, from Matrix and Christopher, both asking about the cadence needed to meet that regulatory deadline and the vehicle that will be launching these. So do we know about when we may start seeing all of these different launches, Alex?
Boy. I wouldn't be able to say, to be honest, because it's really a complicated thing. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, it's tricky. It's a lot of satellites, so we'll see how they end up doing that. Sorry about that. Cheeky, hop on over. Thank you.
I think
All
I
right.
gave some kind of I think I gave some kind of premonition or like prediction or things like that on the Kuiper live stream. I mentioned things like, well, for Kuiper on New Glenn, for example, that might not be until 2025. On Atlas V, it might not be until, I mean, they have already done the prototype launch, but then they have the operational satellites, and they are targeting spring of next year. We'll see about that, because Atlas V also has a bit of a busy schedule. Also, Vulcan is debuting and everything. So yeah, we'll see. And Ariane 6, boy,
Well,
I'm not
yeah.
putting my money on Ariane 6. Look at Jake.
Hi, Jakey. Yeah, for those who are wondering, that's my cat, Jake. We need to get him his own like little name placard thing for streams.
He's so clingy. That's a really rare cat.
He's a very clingy, cuddly cat, that is for sure. Oh, you had a question, Jake? Oh, he picked James Atkinson's question here, asking, do we know what the lifespan of these satellites is meant to be? So, I mean, how long is it supposed to be, and how does that compare to what we already see with something like Starlink? Trevor, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, once again, I don't think Amazon has answered this question, sadly. With Starlink, we've seen about 5 years. We have no idea if that's, I'm guessing it's about the same for Amazon satellites, but we're not sure.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that again, because we've already seen some of the Starlinks deorbit so far, which is planned. And after a while, they're in an orbit that, if for some reason they can't deorbit it or they run out of fuel or whatever the case may be, that over time they will deorbit themselves and eventually burn up, which is the goal, to not deal with all of this space junk. Like, I don't know, Dish Network maybe getting fined for it kind of thing. Do want to hit some support here and some questions that you guys have been asking through Super Chats. First off, Eric, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. Oh my gosh, Marvin. 2 of them here. First off, if properly fueled, how long would it take for Starship to escape the velocity of one of Sawyer's puns? The answer is 7.
Oh, hold on. Let me do the math.
And then also adding,
Okay.
puns make the world go round. Just kidding. No, you're not kidding. That's the only reason the Earth is continuing to spin, is because I keep making puns. That's totally how that works. Oh. As for actual serious question here, Musical Wolves saying, will Amazon be launching more than 2 satellites at a time in the future? Alex?
Well, of course they're going to be launching more than 2 at a time. The only difference is that they're launching prototype satellites, and so they only built 2. The whole history of how they were going to launch, it's a all soap opera kind of thing, where it was going to be on the ABL RS-1 rocket. We're going to be launching 1 and 1, basically 1 on one rocket and 1 on another rocket. And they were going to be launching these this year around the beginning of 2023. Problem is that rocket had a year did its flight, and so when then it hasn't. So they were like, okay, well, we'll fly on Vulcan's first was going to be debuting beginning of this year. Problem is, it didn't. By the time Vulcan was laid, were already there at the Cape. They have been were transported there in March of this year or thereabouts. So by the time Vulcan was delayed, they were already there. So they're okay, what are we gonna do? And they just brought 9 Atlas V contracts, and they them and said, "Hey, we're gonna launch on that Atlas." And so this is this launch that you see there.
Yep, again, the final of the 501s, that's the 5-meter fairing, 0 solid rocket motors, and the single Centaur upper stage engine, which the launch video, shout out to Julia, by the way, for a fantastic tracking job on that launch. So just wanted to throw that out there. I was next to her as she was tracking it, so great work on that. And yeah, we will hopefully see more of these Kuiper satellites launching soon. And again, then the other interesting thing will be in terms of the cost and how much it's going to be for their services, especially compared to something like Starlink, which we already basically know of the price, and what kind of additional hardware you might need to purchase to be able to access it. So there's still a lot of questions.
Yeah, no, that'll be super interesting. Also, before I start this answer, I just want to say, if you hear any background noise, I'm really sorry. Work started, of course, right as I went live. I can't control it. However, the question about cost will be very interesting in my opinion, because SpaceX has the advantage that they're able to launch on their own vehicles, and right, Amazon will not have that until somewhat New Glenn. And Falcon 9 internal launch costs seem like they are quite cheap. So if you're paying, let's just say 3 or 4 times more for launches, if not more, and again, that numbers is total speculation. Will you be able to deliver a properly competitive product? It'll be interesting.
Exactly. And again, a lot of that I think will become more apparent once they get into more of these launches and we see if they release any data or anything they've learned from this particular Protoflight. So there's still a lot of interesting things that we'll have to keep an eye on with that. By the way, I see Crispy horsing around in chat. So, hi, Chris. References. I say that because we have one here from Elisar. What will get the first Starship launch license? What will happen first, I guess? Let's see here. So, going on now with all these small constellations. Just what comes and yeah, launch. So, launch prediction. Do you think, Trevor, that we might operate?
Oh boy. I'm guessing we start seeing operational launches like mid to late next year.
Okay, yeah, and by the way, launching their own vehicle. I realized I mentioned this. We have actually seen some New Glenn items around the Cape at the launch pad C in our most recent KSC flight plug. Sorry, had to give that a mention there. Let's see here. Apologies for that. We're just making sure that everyone can see us and hear us and do the best you can to kind of understand what we're saying here. Because I know that we are currently dealing with some stream issues. So hang tight. We're working on it. We promise. So does that mean now that we get to start making fun of horses? Oh, no, wait, no. Never doing that. Which football is best? Bruce Springsteen's better than Taylor Swift?
Hey, too far.
Oh boy. Again, I just want to make sure that everyone who's watching, we get to be able to answer all of your questions. And I'm seeing a bunch of 5x5s now. There we go. Fantastic. So, and I'm just making sure 5 by 5, that's not the number of pixels that you're seeing on your screen, right? Okay. There you go. Trying to get that pun in there. All right. So, let's move on then to our next topic. Hopefully, we can get all of our technology back and people talking about Psyche, because I don't know about you, but I'm psyched to talk about this topic. Psych. That one, I know. That one didn't rock. It wasn't super metal.
Haha, what could that be referring to?
I don't know. Let's see who we have back, because I know Alex was originally going to be talking about that. I don't know if we can hear Alex or Alex can hear us tech-wise.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can cover it if you
I was
I
gonna
can
say,
hear
Trevor, do you
you,
want to take this?
but I'm not sure if I'm good.
All right,
Am I
I'll just
good?
take this and then
Yeah, Trevor, we'll let you take this
Yeah.
one about Psyche. So.
yeah, so very exciting launch coming up this next week. Psyche, as Sawyer mentioned, will be launching planned orbital mission to the asteroid 16 Psyche. It will be the heaviest known M-type asteroid. Also, it's right outside my window right now. Sawyer, do you want to take this just so I can not have this background noise?
Sure. Just fair warning, that'll be more puns, but yeah. So yes, this will go out, as you mentioned, to 16 Psyche, and I joke that, this launch will rock it, and it's pretty metal, because it is going to what is believed to be the first study of a basically pretty much all metal asteroid. It's believed that this was a protoplanet, so a planet that started to form but kind of didn't, and had a large part of it blasted away after a violent collision, revealing the inner crust after it wiped away the whole outer crust of everything. So we're hoping that maybe we'll get some really cool data on this. It's believed to be iron nickel, so we'll get at least 5 cents worth of data there. But it'll be really interesting to see the science on this. This has been off delayed a little bit. It took a little while to get to this point after some spacecraft issues missed the launch window last year. And again, a reminder, the launch window for this one only extends, I believe, until October 25th, with the current targeted launch date being October 12th at 10:16 a.m. Eastern Time. So it's a kind of narrow window that they have to actually go out and get to this asteroid. Now, unlike what we saw with, say, asteroid Bennu and with OSIRIS-REx, this is not a sample return mission, but it still has tons of really cool scientific instruments on it that will be used to hopefully help understand the makeup of it, study the metal on it, and better understand the formation of planets in the early solar system, which, in my opinion, is pretty darn cool. Also pretty darn cool, the launch vehicle that we'll be flying on, which is the Falcon Heavy. Can't go wrong with one of those. That is going to be launching on the center core, the 1079, which will be on its first and only flight. And then the side cores are going to be 1064 and 1065, both on their fourth flight, both scheduled to land back at the landing zones at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, LZs 1 and 2. So as we like to call it, an RTLS mission for those side cores there. At this point, we saw the fairing with the spacecraft inside it drive by on its way from its processing facility over to the Cape to hopefully be mated with that Falcon Heavy, which already has done its static fire. So lots of excitement coming up now as we get ready for the Psyche launch. Again, currently scheduled for October 12th. Trevor, I don't know if your noise is quieted down there, but...
That it is.
There we go. Science-wise for this mission, what do you think we're hoping to really get from this?
Yeah, so, right, as you said, a lot of this is going to be investigating the nature of the formation of the solar system. And one of the best ways to go about that is go to some of these rocks. And, well, okay, a rock is a pretty bad way to describe an asteroid, but these asteroids and whatever in the Earth orbit that we think were pretty foundational, as you were saying, in the formation of the solar system. So what we're able to do is when we go there, we can look at their elemental makeup and whatnot to try to get a idea of, like, say, what the Earth and other planets looked like that long ago and what material they're made up of. And then from that, you can kind of backtrack to try to gain a lot of information about our planet and solar system as it is today. So I think this is kind of one of the missions where we expect to learn a lot from it now. And then once the mission is there and once it's happening, we'll just keep learning more and more and more, just like Hubble did and basically every other of these large NASA missions has done.
Now, Alex, I think we have you back. I want to start off with an interesting question here about the Falcon Heavy, then we'll get back to some of the science on this mission. That diabetic kid asking, why does SpaceX seem to prefer new center cores and not reused boosters? Because this one, as mentioned, again, this is on its first and only flight.
Yeah, well, it's not that they prefer; it's that it is their only, basically their only option to fly the that the center core needs to be reinforced. It is a unique build rocket. It is not a stage that it is like the side boosters, for example, which can be converted into a Falcon 9 booster, or they can be a regular. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I'm seeing people in the chat saying that they lost me. So
Oh. Let's see. I mean, I could take it. Like you're mentioning, I don't know if you were able to hear it or not, but that's kind of pretty much their only option right now, as you mentioned, is that in terms of launching Falcon Heavy, the center core, after the first couple of missions, they decided it's not really going to be reflown again. They're not going to try and recover it downrange with any of the drone ships or anything like that. So at that point, you're going to use that new core, and yes, it's going to get disposed of, but you're getting the full performance out of it, and there's not like there's any center core that you can really reuse anyway. And keep in mind, the center cores for Falcon Heavy are a little bit different. The side cores, a lot of times you'll see those alternate as a Falcon 9 booster and then fly as a side core on a Falcon Heavy or vice versa. Those can kind of be interchanged. You just put the cap on the top. Whereas the center cores are specifically strengthened, the fact that they have to be able to hold those side core boosters on them. They have the attachments on them that those side boosters end up attaching to, and that they can also separate during launch. So at that point, you're kind of limited in what you can do with it. So that's why it's typically the same one, a one-time flyer in the middle, but the reused side cores.
Yeah, and it's worth adding on to that for a while it had seemed like SpaceX had completely abandoned the idea of recovering the center core. However, I believe it was probably about 2 months ago at this point, on Twitter, one of SpaceX's mission managers had noted that an upcoming Falcon Heavy flight, they didn't say which one, they were going to attempt to recover all three cores. So hopefully at some point we will still see a center core reuse, but as Sawyer has mentioned, SpaceX has only landed one center core on the Arabsat 6A mission, which subsequently tipped over on its way back because Octogravity wasn't working, and they were just able to recover pieces of it from the ocean. So they do not have a landed center core that they could even use if they wanted to.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a shame there. And I think another important thing in terms of that trying to recover the center stage, the reason you're flying on Falcon Heavy is because you need a lot of that extra power and the thrust that you get. So you're going to push that thing to its max, and you're talking about landing these, 1,100, 1,200 kilometers in some cases downrange. And you're also landing it on one of your drone ships. Now, as mentioned before, there are 3 Starship launches this week between, the Cape and Vandenberg and
Starlink launches, not Starship. Just
Starlink. Thank you. Starlink, yeah. Brain.
Don't want to have people panicking, like, how did I miss Starship's launch?
Yeah, no. There's so many launches happening around the Cape. The turnaround time for all of the drone ships is they're basically in port, take the booster off, and in less than 24 hours in some instances, they're turned around and already going back out for the next launch. So you kind of need those drone ships ready if you're going to keep up the rest of that cadence. And if it's 1,200 kilometers downrange carrying the center core there, it's going to take a lot longer for it to get out there and a lot longer for it to come back. And that's one less recovery option you kind of have for those missions too.
Yeah, and we saw this, I believe, earlier this year when SpaceX was launching the USSF 44, if I remember correctly, mission, where at first we were pretty confident that that was going to be expending the center core and landing both side boosters downrange on their drone ships. And then pretty close to launch, that seems to have changed, where they changed it to return both of those to LZ1 and LZ2. So that just really shows that SpaceX is trying to not ruin their launch cadence with Falcon Heavy, since whether it's having one drone ship downrange for the center core, which is really far, taking further, or even worse, having both of your drone ships downrange, they're trying to not do that if possible.
Exactly. Now, I have to ask this question just because it's NSF, and I like annoying some of our people, especially Max, about this one. Space Podcast asking, could a Falcon 9 or Falcon Heavy upper stage fit two downsized MVACs, aka the stubby nozzles? I don't think that would make a lot of logical sense when you're already getting the power out of the single regular MVAC and having to produce more. But Trevor, I don't know, which team are you on first off, Team Stubby or Team Not? And then do you think that would be possible?
Well, no offense to Max, but how could anyone prefer the stubby nozzle?
Yes.
And so I suspect radius-wise, I suspect you wouldn't be able to fit two engines, but even more than that, the second stage is just not designed to have two engines mounted to it. There would have to be a ridiculous amount of redesigning of the Falcon Center stage. And that's not to mention that MVAC by itself is already extraordinarily powerful of a second stage. And when you compare it to like the RL-10 or whatever on Centaur, the acceleration of the second stage is way, way, way higher. So I think the one thing Falcon 9 second stage does not need is more thrust.
I mean, always be thrusting, but doesn't necessarily mean you need more of it, right?
Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah, I see the stubby nozzle gang is trying to come out in force in chat, but I don't think so. I see a lot of people asking this question about, wouldn't they be able to build another drone ship, or are there any plans to build a fourth drone ship? I don't think there have been any for the time being, though, right? And then would they still be able to keep up the cadence with their current two on the east and one on the west?
Yeah. So, right, as you've said, SpaceX and Elon have not come out and said that they have any plans to build a fourth drone ship. However, if they want to launch 144 times next year, as Elon posted on Twitter, because already said they want 10 launches per month by the end of 2023, and then in 2024 they want 12 launches per month. So if they want to reach that cadence, it would be very difficult given their current drone ship situation unless they added more RTLS missions, which doesn't seem that likely to me. So I suspect at some point they will make a fourth drone ship. However, again, no official plans, and something that SpaceX would have to weigh is it more beneficial for SpaceX to have 4 drone ships that they have to operate and be able to launch, an additional Starlink mission or so per week? Or is it better to have RTLS missions where they could probably launch on the order of 12 to 14 Starlink V2 mini satellites, somewhere in there? So yeah, I don't have any insight into that internal calculus, but I would love to be in on the meeting where they decide.
That would be fun to be a fly on the wall, if nothing else. Yeah.
Yeah.
Alex, we'll see if we can get this question to you. Hopefully, we'll be able to hear you this time. Um, Joni asking, assuming Psyche really is a planetary core, or sorry, I'll go with six strings first. My apologies. Are there plans to do a return mission from Psyche in the future? What do you think the odds would be of doing a sample return from that?
I'm not fully sure. I guess we'll have to see and what we discover when Psyche goes out there. But I'm not fully sure if we're going to have anything like it, at least in the foreseeable future. Now, obviously, if we find out things that are very exciting out there, maybe we'll see something, some sample return mission or anything like it, all the way from Psyche and back. But it's quite complicated because it's out there all the way between Mars and Jupiter, so it's not really that easy.
And another thing to keep in mind, especially if you compare it to something like OSIRIS-REx, that was a lot of dirt and rock and ice, at least for what we believe. We'll see what the samples reveal a little later this coming week. But this is metal. This is likely very hard metal. I don't know if you can just basically have a little vacuum high five machine to go suck it up and bring back a sample. So you've got that issue to deal with as well.
One of the good things is that Psyche is relatively large, and so you could probably just land on it, like have some harpoons or something style, with like Philae, for example, when ESA sent that with Rosetta to, I think it is Churimov Gerasimenko or something like it, the name of the comet. But you could probably just have like anchors and then in the middle or something have some kind of drill, and then you drill into the metal, which obviously it's an easier thing than, the way that we did it with OSIRIS-REx, where it was just like sucking in all the boulders and everything. It's very likely that if it's a completely metal core, then there's not going to be a lot of boulders or anything like it. It's going to be more of a solid surface. So then the harpooning and everything, that might be a better way to actually land and then drill into it.
Just going to point out, space harpoons. Yes. All right. And then one more, the one from Joni asking, assuming Psyche really is a planetary core, what are the odds that the probe has the right instruments to tell us all we want to know? I think they've done some really good research into this, because this is part of what are known as the Discovery class missions that are basically designed to go and find out all these new things and study certain interesting things like moons of planets or asteroids or heck, even, out to planets that we haven't studied that much. I think they're pretty loaded up with science instruments on this, though, right? Trevor, do you want to take this one?
Alex may be able to have more insight onto this than I do, but I think this is something that's relatively well known, what instruments you need to study these certain materials, and they were able to account for that and put all of those on the spacecraft. But Alex, do you have anything to add?
Well, I really haven't looked yet into what all of the instruments, because I'm looking for those for next week when we're actually launching that. But it is definitely one of these class of missions where it was supposed to be around $500 million, and then it grew up the whole cost to about $1 billion, which is a bit of a number. And as you mentioned, these are sort of like the type of missions that you kind of go and just look for one kind of thing. And so I'm not sure if there's a lot of instruments on this spacecraft. I do know that there's about a ton of xenon in this spacecraft because it uses ion thrusters. There are 4 ion thrusters on this spacecraft, and it's a really, really big kind of I don't know, what is the name? Jeez. Basically, it can hold a lot of xenon precisely because it is only using ion engines to get to the asteroid. And when you take that into account, when you take that number and you compare it to other missions, I believe this is the one that is going to carry the most xenon of any other spacecraft. It's just like it's a ton of xenon. I believe that is about maybe 1% of all production worldwide every year, right? So that's a lot of for just one spacecraft when you take into account the worldwide production of that. But it is true that the rest is just instruments and the body of the spacecraft. I'm not fully sure though how many of these instruments are going to be on the systems, because again, I'm going to be looking for
Um,
that data next week.
Yes, I just
That
quickly
is
pulled up, by the way, on JPL's website, they list 4 main instruments. The first being X-band gravity science investigation, a magnetometer. Wow, I just butchered that.
magnetometer.
Yes, I really butchered that. Gamma ray and neutron spectrometer, and then a multispectral imager.
And I believe that along those lines, this is actually the first spacecraft that will be going into deep space using those Hall effect type thrusters that Alex was just talking about. And we'll actually be doing some radio science as well in the X band, especially for telecommunications. So some cool firsts in that as well. And really quickly, I do want to thank Jim Cavett here for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. So thank you very much for that. And if you did get one of those gifted Red Team memberships, please make sure you give Jim a big thank you there. Now, we're hoping that mission was a success, but recently, Rocket Lab had a successful failure, I guess is the best way to put it. Yeah, Trevor, you want to explain a little bit about why we're happy Neutron kind of had a little failure in its testing?
Yeah, of course. So this is something that we see in Starbase all of the time that Rocket Lab did the other day, and they completed a cryogenic testing of the Neutron second stage. So, right, Neutron is Rocket Lab's next generation launch vehicle, which will be partially reusable and also fully made of composites. So just like in Starbase, this involved filling the tank with liquid nitrogen and pressurizing it to expected flight pressure. Then after they did a test with that under what they expect during flight loads, they pushed it all the way to failure to test extreme tolerances. So here's footage of it now. You can see it being filled up, and then eventually it bursts. In Rocket Lab's tweet, they mentioned that it reached the MEOP, which stands for maximum expected operating pressure, and then also went even further than that. Rocket Lab CEO Peter Beck said, quote, "Test to failure is the only way to really expose any weak points and validate true margins. At Neutron scale, it's even more fun." And we'll see what he means by that in a second when this thing pops. Let's see. So yeah, Neutron, as I was mentioning, is their next generation vehicle, which will be able to carry 13 tons into low Earth orbit, 1.5 tons into Mars and Venus, and then the first stage will be able to be recovered both on drone ship and at landing pads. The timeline on the Rocket Lab page shows a few more milestones planned for this year, including the first Archimedes engine, which is the engines on the first stage, which will be test fired. And then they're still planning and targeting a launch in 2024.
There you go. That's a really interesting point. They are targeting 2024 for this. Alex, I'm going to put this to you. What do you think are the odds of Neutron actually getting its first test flight in 2024?
Oh boy, I think unless I see any other piece of data, any other piece of, like for example, a picture just of the launch pad, see how it's going, I don't know if I'm really that optimistic of a launch in 2024. I don't think that's gonna be doable to launch next year. Because we haven't really seen, for example, tanks for the stage 1 of Neutron, or even any of the mechanisms for the fairings or anything like it. We really haven't seen a lot of the stuff that you will see already by this time, or even the engines themselves. Like we've seen renders, we've seen prototypes of the engines, but we haven't seen them firing the engine. We haven't seen them, testing them all the way, like multiple times and things like that. We haven't really seen that. We actually see more, for example, from Relativity's Ion R engine, which is already at full scale testing, than with Archimedes. And the Terran R rocket, the one where the Ion R engine is going to be flown on, that's not scheduled to launch until 2026. Seems like Relativity pushed that from 2024 to 2026, precisely because they were sort of trying to target something more realistic. I think perhaps at this stage where we haven't seen yet a full tank for the first stage, we haven't seen full firing of the Archimedes engine. I think 2025 or 2026 is more realistic for Neutron than 2024. Now it is good to have these lofty goals and fast schedules and things like that, and then that and try to drag it all the way down the years. But definitely don't think it's gonna be next year.
Yeah, I think they still have a ways to go on this. I think keep in mind, this was never originally planned to be a thing. I mean, Peter Beck basically said, I'll eat my hat if we do something like this, and then literally ate his hat because here we are with Neutron in the works. But it's worth noting here, again, we think of things like, New Glenn or these other large, heavy lift vehicles. Keep in mind, Rocket Lab's current Electron vehicle is on the smaller side, so when we're talking about Neutron, we're basically talking about something that is comparable in size to, say, a Falcon 9, and in terms of its payload capacity as well. By the way, Trevor, can you tell your neighbors to knock it off? Just saying.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Of course, right as we started, this had to start, so I can't do anything about it. I'm really sorry, and hopefully it's not too distracting.
That's all right. I don't want to keep hammering home the point, so it's fine. Sorry, had to make a pun out of it, of course.
More puns and more puns.
Then instead of more puns, we can kind of go to more questions instead. I'm wondering, and I'll put this to everyone here because I think it's a really interesting question. Do you think there's a market for something like Neutron when you have already, Falcon 9 and some of these other vehicles that are similar in terms of their payload capacity? Alex, I'll start with you first. Do you think that Neutron is a viable competitor to someone like SpaceX?
Well, that is a great question. I think it's going to be hard for Neutron to compete with Falcon 9. We're talking about a rocket that is, maybe launching next year. Again, I'm not optimistic about that. I'm thinking more 2025 or 2026 for that. And by 2025, 2026, Falcon 9 will be launching hundreds of time, like plural with 100, because it's already targeting 144 launches next year, probably ramping up a bit more by 2025, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be slowing down just yet. We know that at one point Starship is going to come and everything, but Starship is also going to take a bit to get to those high cadence of flights, and so it is probably not a thing, in my opinion. I think Neutron is gonna have a really hard time to get to the point of like flying regularly, flying reliably, because as we've seen with Electron, is quite hard to get the reliability. Even after 40 flights, you can still have a failure. So it is quite difficult to get the reliability, the cadence, and obviously that's what the customers want. They want you to be launching regularly. They want you to be launching safely, right? And so that's going to be a hard thing to get for Neutron, I think, and frankly for any other medium launch vehicle in the market that's about to come. So even though it's reusable and everything like it, it's probably not going to be that much cheaper than Falcon 9, and Falcon 9 will have the advantage of launching more frequently, having reliability track record, etc., etc. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's
Trevor,
not
what do you
even
think?
to mention that, right, as Sawyer was saying earlier, I'm not sure if you guys heard it, because it may have been when we were having network issues, but we're seeing hardware for New Glenn at the Cape. And New Glenn, I think, is going to be one heck of a thing to compete against. So when you're competing against Falcon 9, which will still be launching, Starship, and New Glenn, and then possibly, like Terran R
and Neutron, and then there are several other medium to heavy lift launchers. I think it's going to be very hard to not be SpaceX or Blue Origin in that position. However, Rocket Lab has shown success with the small set industry, which many others haven't. So hopefully they prove me wrong, but I'm not too optimistic about it being able to compete.
I think it's going to have its own very specific market because, I mean, right now, SpaceX is the head honcho in the game. They've gotten the price down, they've gotten the launch cadence up, and that's what people expect, especially, with their current reliability as well being as great as it's been. I think Neutron will have a market for it. Maybe people that aren't able to launch from the Cape and it's easier to get it to New Zealand or Wallops, maybe orbital inclination, maybe how much oomph they need. I mean, it's going to take a while, I think, for them to get the price down to be super competitive, but hopefully they will get to that point. So that's kind of what I'm banking on for Neutron's future, if there is that much of a future for it, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, the other thing that I certainly, or that I guess concerns is probably the best word, is that Neutron is entirely composite. And Rocket Lab obviously knows what they're doing with composites, right? Electron is fully composite, and they seem to be industry leaders in that way. But it certainly is a more expensive way of making vehicles. So will it really be able to compete with an aluminum alternative? Remains to be seen. But again, hopefully Rocket Lab shows that they're very competent at this and can do it cheaply.
I'm sorry, what metal did you say?
Yes, aluminium, the way that it's supposed to be pronounced.
Sorry to interrupt, Alex. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was actually muted on the on the live stream side. Excuse me. The thing is that is actually a great point because I think at one point Peter was saying that the Neutron flights will be about $50 million. And sure, that's probably around the same price of a Falcon 9. The problem is Neutron can lift only half of what Falcon 9 can lift. So we're talking, well, maybe not half, more like 2/3 of what Falcon 9 can do. So we're talking about same price, but you can do less performance. So at the end of the day, in a price per kilogram basis, it is more expensive. Even though it is supposed to be reusable, recover the fairings and everything, it still is not getting to the point of how cheap Falcon 9 is. And so this brings up the questions like, what else are you doing that it is being more expensive, even though it's a relatively same size kind of rocket? You're using, you're using carbon composites, but then you're reusing them, right? So is it that the fixed cost of launching this rocket is so higher than Falcon 9? Like what's going on here, right? It's a huge thing. And Peter goes on this thing of being like, well, we excel on other things, not just on price. We are competitive on other things. So it will definitely be good to pick on him and be like, well, okay, what are the other things that you excel at, right? And see what other competitive edge they have. Because obviously that's probably what their customers want to know, right? What else can you offer me? And you can go into things like, well, maybe they can develop a tug, for example, in space to deploy all of these constellations based on their Photon spacecraft. Just make it larger, right? Have a multiple Super Curie engines or something like that, whatever they're called, right? And then maybe that could be an edge that they could have because that's a thing that SpaceX doesn't offer, for example. And so a complete solution, for example, for the customer might be something more appealing if you're launching, say, super constellations, mega constellations. You're trying to launch multiple satellites at a time. If you have a tug that they can, deploy these satellites into different orbits, might be more compelling. This is something that SpaceX, for example, doesn't really offer because they don't have that capability. They
Yeah,
could develop, but they haven't. So
I think another thing to consider is, right, Falcon 9's launch price is somewhat plateaued at seemingly the $60 to $90 million price tag. But there's no evidence to suggest that they couldn't keep lowering that. It just seems that, right, SpaceX has no incentive to keep lowering that launch cost right now because they don't have any real competition in terms of
medium lift vehicles outside of DoD and whatever, but those missions are somewhat different. So commercially, it's like 60 to 90 million, but who says they couldn't reduce Falcon 9's launch price to, again, making up numbers here, like 40 or 50 million? So you have to not only compete with Falcon 9 where it is today, but Falcon 9 keeping into account that they can probably reduce price now that they're reusing boosters more and more, they're reusing fairings, they're launching over 100 times a year. So it'll be difficult to compete.
Yeah, and if you think about it, they already kind of do that with the transporter missions, and now they're going to be debuting bandwagon missions next year. So they have all of these rideshare missions where, if you look at the sort of per satellite basis, when you have, for example, a spacecraft that is 200 kilograms and you can launch it by paying basically $1.5 million on a transport mission, versus say, the Electron is about $10 million, $12 million for the same capability. It's like you're paying 10 times more to launch the same. Sure, you're on a rideshare mission, but then again, when you add up all of the customer, all of the money that the customer pay, you probably get to a total cost or a total price, I will guess, of like $40-50 million. So transport missions are being like the money that they get, it seems to be not as much as when they fly like these big giant satellites on their own, like a geostationary satellite or anything like it. Because again, when you take into account these smaller rideshare missions and you try to do like an estimate of how much money they get, it's somewhere around $40 and $50 million, and they still do them, right? And not only that, but they have now expanded from transporter to also doing bandwagon missions, which are basically the same, but instead of being polar launches, they are to just mid inclination, like 45 degrees or thereabouts. And so they are actually increasing the amount of these launches. So they're seeing a market. So if with a cheaper kind of launch profile, they can still get customers and they are willing to increase this number of missions, who says that they cannot do that with a big satellite, right? Where they have to launch just one big satellite into geostationary orbit or something like that. And so that is definitely a good point.
Yeah, I think to add on to what you were saying, that is, I think the size of the dedicated launch market for small satellites was kind of over approximated. And I think the fact is that there's, of course, some small satellites that care which orbit they go to, and Electron and other vehicles are perfect for those. However, the vast majority seem to either A, go to sun-synchronous orbit, or B, not really care what orbit they're in because they just want to do testing. So that's where the Falcon 9 and other rideshare missions are really appealing for the prices that you were alluding to.
Which, by the way, I know Patrick said this isn't fight mode, but that was kind of perfect fight mode. Just saying.
Oh, was it fight mode?
That was fight mode. I know you guys couldn't hear the ding ding, but yeah.
Yeah. I couldn't hear it.
That's okay. Anyway, though, I do want to hit some support here. We have a bunch of gifted memberships. Coco, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. RC Horseman, thank you as well for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. And Blushy Boy, thank you for gifting a Red Team membership. Of course, if you got one, please make sure you thank whoever it was that was kind enough to gift those to you. And hopefully you enjoy some of the awesome perks that come with the membership. And then Snotgarden with the generous super chat here saying, psyched for Psyche. I appreciate the wordplay. Wish I could be there in person. Thanks for great coverage of everything space. Well, thank you for watching. And a reminder, we will be live for the Psyche launch. Again, currently scheduled for October 12th, 10:14 a.m. Eastern Time. We will be live about an hour and a half or so before the scheduled liftoff. So make sure you tune into NSF, the whole, subscribe, hit the notification bell, etc. So you know when we actually do go live, and so you can watch the launch and ask your questions to those of us in the studio and those of us that'll be there at the launch itself, like myself. Now it's time, I know everyone's been waiting for this, for Starship. I do actually want to say, though, when I was at the launch recently for the one for the Protoflight, I was actually driving around Port Canaveral, and I happened to see my first ever Cybertruck in person. It is a very interesting looking vehicle, to say the least. But what is really cool was seeing the Cybertruck carrying an engine around Starbase, and we have some awesome metal prints available of that shot that Sean got. I know it made Jack a little jealous that he was not at Starbase for it, but still absolutely phenomenal shots there. As such a cool view. It's the future. That is the future. I gotta say, the Starship I saw, or not the Starship, the Cybertruck I saw in person, admittedly, I'll be honest, I thought it kind of looked like a bunch of high schoolers tried to learn how to weld together in the shop, but seeing that picture, though, makes it look so cool. Again, it's available to shop.nasaspaceflight.com, along with all of our other amazing metal prints, including all the things going on at Starbase, Atlas, because we also love Atlas, as you saw. Some great stuff there. And a reminder, because we are live, you can also send a message. Yes, including the patch that Alex is holding up right now.
This one is also one of the patch, but I need to like rotate the entire thing, so I can't. But it's also the shirt with the patch. I have two actually. I have a bunch of these here. See, I took them out precisely.
Flight test.
I have a bunch of these. It's not a joke. I give them out to the family and things like that. I have stickers and patches and things like that. They say, "Oh, you work at NSF." I'm like, "Yeah, you want some patches?" And so I give them out. I buy them and give them out.
There you go. And again, those, as you can see, are available in the shop. Shop.nasaspaceflight.com. Some amazing, amazing work there by Pauline with the gorgeous design. I do just want to acknowledge her work on that, because the patches are so cool. I have one of the first flight test ones, and I'm going to have to get myself a second flight test one too.
Yeah, the embroidery on the new ones, the shop team just did a phenomenal job with, because it goes like out with the flame, and it's so cool.
It really is. Now, while we're talking about Starship stuff, unfortunately, we did see the destack recently of ship 29 of the ship in the booster 25 and booster 9. There we go, numbers. Yeah. Do you think they did it just for the photo op with the Raptor engine there being towed? Alex, what do you think is going on with that?
Well, boy, it could have been for that. We actually have an upcoming Starbase update tomorrow that I wrote, and the whole thing is that we saw last week how they stacked again, but prior to that, they had removed the hot staging ring. They had done some work on the forward dome of the booster. It appeared at least that they did some work there, because they had a scaffolding going into that part of the booster and things like that. And we don't know if they did any sort of work on that hot staging ring when it was down there on the ground. So you could think, well, maybe they stacked again to see if everything fits together. But then, the Cybertruck with the engine and things like that, and doing the whole parade up and down Highway 4, it's like, well, is it really because of that? It could be, right? that kind of gives you the impression that it might be for that reason. And so you can see there that I think that's the D-stack, right? That's the latest daily that we have on the channel, and they got lucky. I think they probably didn't plan to do this right before a storm, but there was a storm later that day through Starbase, and it was like it poured a lot of rain, a lot of wind, and things like that. People were thinking, well, that's why they destacked, and then they were waiting patiently for them to restack again, and it's like, yeah, they haven't restacked yet. It doesn't seem like they destacked just because of the weather. It seems like it was just because it was already time for the destack to happen. They had already done all their stuff that they wanted to do with it. And so, yeah, because otherwise we will have seen that already being stacked, right? Now, probably I will get a ping, Alex, they're stacking it again. right? Right in this moment, someone pings me and they're stacking it again. But yeah, because that's a SpaceX, right? When you say, oh well, maybe they won't do this, and then they go and do it. That's very hilarious. We actually have that kind of thing on Starbase Update because we write it on the weekends and we publish on Monday, and we're in that time frame between we write it and record it and then we publish it, they can do many other things, right? And so we usually say maybe by the time you're watching, they have already done this, right? We're like, oh, we don't know if they're gonna do it. Maybe by the time you're watching, they have already done that. So, and sometimes it happens. So yeah.
And we're only talking a 48-hour time period here between when it's recorded and when it's published. So it's not like we're talking a really long time, but in SpaceX terms, I guess 48 hours is like an eternity.
Oh yeah. And it used to be that weekends were very, I don't know, very very quiet. There was not a lot of activity. There were not big tests or things like that. Sometimes we're seeing, like, I think one of the static fires of Booster 9 was on a Sunday. So right now you're seeing how more active they're being on weekends, and like Saturdays and Sundays are now being packed with more stuff. And so that's why, when we do these videos, sometimes I have to put in some kind of phrase being like, hey, maybe by the time you're watching on Monday, it's already happened. So that's why I say, when I said the whole thing of, well, we have seen it already being restacked or something. Maybe people pinging me about about it being restacked today.
Oh boy, already the the pinging coming for Alex, and also some store purchases. So very nice.
The patch,
Hey, yes.
it's nice. I like the colors, like all of the colors, and it's embroidered and everything. So it's really really nice, really brilliant, really shiny.
Oh yeah. Uh, sorry, I get distracted. Ooh, pretty banners. But yeah. Um,
Like your cat.
yes, like Jake, who has now hidden in my office closet at the moment. He was on my rug a bit ago, but yeah. Um, let's see. Going back to Starship here. While we were talking, you mentioned there was the storm that was coming through and all of that. Joni asking, how does the freshwater impact from the new deluge system compare to something like a rainy weekend? Trevor, is there really a difference with that?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. Right. I think in many ways, the water that comes from the rain is worse than the potable water that'll be from the deluge because it'll be more acidic and whatnot. Uh, However, the other thing that you have to keep in mind is the uh, quantity of water per unit area or whatever, and it's obviously more intense coming out of the deluge system than it is when it's coming down from the clouds. There could be some additional environmental impacts from that. However, it is kind of hard to see the concern about having potable water in a wetland when, like you're saying, you have the rain. Um, but there are obviously things that should be considered, and thankfully, the Fish and Wildlife Service, who knows way more about this than I do, is taking time to do a thorough report and make sure that this is good for the environment.
I think the
Yeah, and I
biggest
think.
difference.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the biggest difference that you're talking about here also is the fact that you're right along the Gulf of Mexico. I think that's more damaging than anything. You've got the salt water from the Gulf that's going to come up, and considering that everything is basically all metal, you run the risk of rust. So obviously, it's not really out there long enough, the whole stack, that it's as big of a concern. But if you look at some of the other ground hardware, some of the fences, some of the things around it, you see a lot of it already getting weathered from that salt water. And I can tell you from personal experience, both in an area where there's a lot of salt because of snow and a lot of salt because of the ocean, it does some serious damage to metal. So I think that's more of an issue than anything. And again, this is basically just water from down the street that they're using for the system.
Sorry, I think we interpreted this question a little bit differently. I was answering like the environmental impacts of the rain versus the environmental impacts that the Fish and Wildlife Services are looking to. I think that's what they were getting at.
Yeah, and I can probably give my opinion here. I will say that the impact is not zero, and I think people are focusing on the wrong question. It's not about, oh, why is it that the Fish and Wildlife Service is looking at this, right? Because it's just water or whatever, right? I think that's not the right attitude, in the sense that the Fish and Wildlife Service has a commitment, right? They have to do
Yeah.
something given by the law, and they need to look into it. And the reason why, it's because they are dumping a lot of water that it is not part of the system, the ecosystem. It is, treated, it is different kind of water, right? And now the issue here is not that they're trying to stop anything. What they're trying to do is look at it and say, okay, does this follow regulations? Because if it doesn't, then the Fish and Wildlife Service by law is basically mandated to say, okay, well, you need to fix this. You need to put some, you know, ways to mitigate this in order to not break the law. They're not trying to say to SpaceX, oh, you're such an environmental polluter, whatever. Like, that's not the point here. The point is that there are certain regulations, and these bodies are just trying to, I guess, save their backs, so to speak, right? To not say other kind of part. But it is pretty much the whole thing here. They're trying to work together on, say, okay, well, we'll look at this data, we'll look at what's going on here, and people say, oh, well, but it rains. Well, the rain is actually part of the thing, of the environment. It is not the same kind of water when you dump potable water. And that potable water, by the way, is being run through the exhaust of a rocket engine, not one, but 33 of them when they work, right? uh, but it is the whole thing here that people are comparing it to water from rain, and it's like, no, they are completely kinds of different water. They're different temperatures, different compositions, different everything. And so you need to look into what is the kind of impact to the environment. And hey, maybe it's just okay, like sure, it might be doing a bit of damage to the environment, but it's not really a huge damage. And the mitigations that SpaceX already put in place, like they had this pond near the OLM. They have other places as well where they can capture a bit of the water here and there. So it's like, maybe that's enough for them. But this is the whole thing. That's precisely what they're doing. They're looking into it and making sure that the way that it is good to go. Or if there's anything to do, then SpaceX can do it and save their backs, right? It's like, that's the whole deal. Because otherwise, someone else can go and sue them and be like, oh, you're not doing your diligent work, which has already happened with the FAA. And so people are looking at this, and I don't think they've been at the other side of the gable in this case, right? When you're being the body that is being sued by these people, it's like, am I doing my job correctly, right? It's like, I have to do my job, and I think I'm doing it correctly, but they're suing me. And so think about that in that sense. That's how I think it.
Yeah, I think that's an important point as well, that, right, even though it does seem like it's just water, one thing that's important to keep in mind is that when you're dealing with an environment as complicated as our atmosphere and our water around, right, that's a very, very chaotic environment. So very small changes in input conditions, if you will, can lead to drastically different outcomes. So that's why I think we've been emphasizing that, it is water, which obviously, as Alex was saying, has more stuff in it, like chemicals such as fluoride and whatnot. And even though it may be a somewhat small amount of water in the grand scheme of things, it could have large impacts, which is why it's important for the Fish and Wildlife Service to do this review.
Well, with all that fluoride, at least the fish will have good teeth. Priorities. Anyway.
Boy, that was a bad pun.
Thank you. Let's kind of go the opposite way here a bit in terms of from water to heat. There's a lot of questions coming in about the hot stage ring. Miles Brown asking, since Starship is supposed to be completely reusable, then with the addition of the hot stage ring, how durable will it be? If you have to replace it, then is it still 100% reusable? Alex, I'll pitch that one to you.
Well, that is the question, right? That is one of the multiple $1 million questions in the whole program. That is Starship. I think that it is going to be a thing that they're going to be figuring out. Ideally, they will probably not want to replace it. Obviously, maybe even integral to the whole rocket at the end of the day. Maybe with some kind of other system to be able to attach it. Um, but I do think it's gonna be reusable. Like at the end of the day, it needs to be reusable in order to be able to, you know, use the whole booster over and over again. And so it is gonna be a matter of just trying to figure out what is needed to be able to reuse that. You have the shield, you have all of the reinforcements and things like that. This is just the first launch with it. There's going to be hundreds and hundreds of Starship launches, right? So they're going to figure it out one way or another, but definitely look out for many, many changes in the future. The Starship that we see right now, it's not going to look the same. Like it's not going to be the same in 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line. It's going to be a completely different rocket, or at least to a certain degree.
Yeah, because I know people are talking about whether the hot stage ring will always be a separate piece or if it'll eventually be integrated down the line. I think that's something that we'll see as the vehicle evolves, right?
Yeah, and also, if you think about it, in the case, because I just saw a comment from Kevin talking about Falcon 9 boosters, they have their intrastage, and the intrastage is integral to the booster, and it is also reused with the booster, right? And sure, the MVAC engine does not fire inside of the intrastage of the Falcon 9, but it gets blasted every single time that they fire that MVAC engine. It gets blasted, and that's actually why they have all of these thermal protection system on the outside. On the interior, it has some kind of coating as well. You can see it on some of the interior shots when they launch and everything. So, look, they figured it out with Falcon 9. Why cannot figure it out with a Starship, right? So that's going to be something down the line that they're going to look into it and just fly and gather more data.
Exactly. And since I haven't mentioned it yet, even with, go ahead, shuttle, it's not so much getting constantly reblasted by heat, but the heat shield tiles had a special coating on them and an injection basically into them that helped to waterproof them for both evaporating on reentry and also once they're just sitting on the pad because of Florida rain. So that still had to be kind of like re-injected every time, but the tiles were still technically reusable. So I could see something like that where you may have to, reapply coatings to it or, do some slight tweak work on it, but it would still technically be reusable and basically be the same thing and, the same part of the rocket. Let's see here. We have some testing coming up on the 9th, 10th, or 11th. And El Hulto Games asking, what do you think will happen or what can happen on the 9th, 10th, and 11th? Is a wet dress rehearsal still a possibility at all? Trevor, I'm going to put this one to you.
Yeah, I believe we are expecting those dates to be used for Ship 26 testing, so that could either be like cryoproof, spin prime, or possibly even static fire. Most likely spin prime, though, because we haven't received an overpressure notice. They're definitely not in a position for a wet dress rehearsal yet because, as we noted, the stack has been destacked and they would want to do a wet dress of the full stack. It is possible that they could full stack before that, but that is not expected at this time.
Yeah, and again, we'll be live streaming that testing when it does happen, so stick around and we'll be able to kind of help guide you along as that does happen. But it's kind of nice to see the testing windows open again, because recently it's either been just for, restack or destack or things rolling to masses and back. So it's kind of nice to hopefully see some testing on the schedule again, right, Alex?
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens with Chip 26 and what they do. I have actually, 'cause I wrote service update. So there's one part where we're like, we don't really know what else they're gonna be doing with this vehicle in terms of the testing. Sometimes they've done some cryo prior to going into engine testing because they already do cryoproof tests, but now they have the engines on the ship, and sometimes they like to do like a quick cryo or something like it on the first day so that they can basically make sure that everything is in the right position in the right location, and then they go into spin prime and static fire. Now I do not know what else they're going to be doing this time around, because obviously this is already ship 26. That's a lot of ships, right? And so it's they're probably at a point where they could probably just do a spin prime and static fire on the same day, with all of the data that they have gathered on previous flights. I'm not fully sure, to be honest. If you ask me, it's a wait and see situation. But definitely stick around our channel, because we're gonna be covering everything that happens, and also you can see it live on Starbase Live, which I think that's a view of, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, go to Starbase Live if you wanna have a view of Ship 26
After this,
doing
of
its
course.
thing. After this, obviously, oh, you're gonna open in another tab. It's, that's a free thing that you can do here.
So, along those lines, Trevor, what do you think we're getting from this testing of Ship 26? Because it doesn't seem like it's going to be flying, at least from what the looks of it are. I mean, it might, but what's with all the Ship 26 testing, do you think?
That is the question, and unfortunately, we don't have any great answers for that. Neither SpaceX or Elon, as usual for these tests, have commented on anything. Um, it's possible that there could be some, new pressurization techniques that they're using or changes to the pressurization system that they're wanting to test out. It's possible that they've done more changes to Raptor that we're not aware of, and perhaps want to do structural testing with it. We're really not sure. So hopefully Elon tweets something about that at some point.
It would be nice to actually get some more information on that, I will say that.
Yeah, it is a bizarre situation since at first this ship was built as purely practice of building starships, and it was never meant to fly. And we expected it to be scrapped alongside its sister bullet ship, Ship 27, which was scrapped. And then it wasn't scrapped, and then it went to Massey's to do cryo and thrust ram testing, if I remember correctly, which was bizarre because we haven't seen that on Ship 25, if I remember correctly. And then they rolled it out to the launch site, threw it on the suborbital pad, and haven't done much with it since. So it is very confusing.
Remember,
Yeah, we
starships
get a
are
lot
meant
of
to fly.
They are meant to fly.
we get a lot of people saying, "Oh, it's a whatever, like a refuel starship or things like that." It's like, look, it doesn't have any of that hardware. It doesn't really have anything. It's just a normal ship that they didn't install flaps. They didn't install heat shield tiles. Just that. It doesn't even have a payload bay for starters. It's not like they put a payload bay, a door, and everything, and then they shut it closed. No, it just doesn't have any of that. But they were planning on doing that because you can see the reinforcements on the basically the welds of the reinforcements that they have on the inside of that payload bay section. So you can see at one point this was going to be a fully built starship, a fully built ship. You can see the studs where they put the heat shield tiles and everything. They are still there. We saw them way back when this was going to be built as a regular ship. How they were removing the tiles. It was still having its tiles. Its mid-lock section, the sort of it has 5 sections. The second one from the bottom, that went to ship 28, and it has a new one. So it's like, look, there's not more proof that I can give you to show you that it is nothing special. It's just a ship that they decided at one point to just remove the flaps, not have any heat shield tiles, and whatever.
Yeah. Now, while we're talking about the bare metal things, I got to go back to it. What do you guys think of seeing Cybertruck driving around there? I'm sorry, I have to bring it back up. Trevor, I'll start with you, and then Alex. What are your thoughts on the Cybertruck that we saw driving around?
I think it's really cool. I think with those wheels, Cybertruck actually looks very good, and I know many people are going to disagree with me. But even if you don't think it's cool, I think it's cool in the sense that this really is the future, and this is so much of Elon and his team's work together. And I don't know, it's just kind of an inspiring image, in my opinion.
Alex?
Well, it's certainly a beast, and then a Cybertruck. Yeah. That's all I can say. I'm probably not probably the farthest from a fan of the Cybertruck. I just think that the other lineup of vehicles that Tesla has, they are really pretty. Cybertruck is an eyesore, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I cannot look at it.
I see a poll just started. Cybertruck, love it, hate it, or I prefer bikes. Okay. Very European-asked question there, because America, biking. But,
Well, I'm European and I don't ride a bike, so there you go.
And
Anyway,
I'm
don't ride-
American
like,
and I
don't
ride a
drive either,
bike.
so.
well, I stand corrected on
Oh
my
yeah, you're
stereotype.
American and you ride a bike. It's true.
That is the one thing I will say, though.
And then
From
you can
that
see
view...
the drone there.
Oh, yes, when I took out the drone. That was... that was phenomenal. Just say.
That's an engine to drone action there. You can
Let's see it again. Let's watch it again. Hang on. Here we go. And beauty shot, gone. Sorry, I enjoyed that too much. One thing I will say, again, when I saw the one in person at the Cape, I did snap a quick picture of it at a red light, which then turned to green, but I was looking at it because it then ended up following behind me. So to look back in the rearview mirror and just see that string of headlight, that at least was kind of cool. You know, it's got that sleek look when you're looking at it head on. The second you look at it from any angle other than directly looking towards the windshield and the headlights, I feel like that's when you go, okay, this is... I get that it's meant to look sci-fi, and it definitely does. It's just, I feel like it needs smoother edges. That's just me personally, my personal opinion on it.
Yeah. I didn't have a comment, I think, that I said it looks like a 2000 gray Ford Fiesta in 240p resolution. It kind of looks like it. Obviously a bit oversized because the Ford Fiesta is not really that big, but it kind of looks like it.
I would just like to point out that 55% of people who have voted have said they love it. So I'm feeling pretty on the correct team here. And can we at least all agree? At least it's not pulling a stubby RVAC.
Oh boy.
I will agree to that. And, it's got a decent towing capacity, it seems like. Also, I know this was a discussion in the back channel when we first saw it. The back of it is also interesting. That looks less sleek since it's kind of got that, it looks like a big giant square butt behind it, but that's just me. I don't know how else to describe it politely.
Like Bob.
So, again, it's interesting to see the majority on YouTube here saying, yeah, 55% love it, 25% hate it, 21% prefer bikes. So, there you go. One thing that we can all agree on is that we appreciate the support from the people getting things at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. So we have a few messages, including Roy saying, great work, guys. Well, thank you. We try our best here. Getting the Starship patch there. And then Douglas coming in with getting a couple items from the store saying, love to support you guys. Well, we appreciate the support. So thank you for getting all of these awesome items and helping to support the stream. It's really appreciated, including the metal prints, which, a reminder, some of that, when you order metal print, some of that does go to the person that actually took the photo as well. So huge shout out to all of our photographers all over the place, from the West Coast to down at Starbase to over at the Cape, to all over the place, who get these fantastic shots. I'm proud to have one shot in there now, but yeah, it's an amazing photography team that gets that out to you guys. One other thing that I do also really appreciate is the people that have been supporting us on this stream, and that includes our launch directors and flight engineers, some of the highest levels of support here at NSF. And one of the perks, of course, is getting your name at the end of NSF Live. And what amazes me the most is that the names, they keep being more and more of them. It might be a little harder to read.
My glasses here.
Oh, we need to get Alex on camera now. Oh, for those, yeah, you couldn't see it, but it actually had glasses on for that. So
I actually took my glasses out.
So shout out to the launch directors and the flight. There we go. Alex, can we see the glasses?
Here we go. Let's see. Okay. I think I can see some of them. Yeah. Okay. I can see them. The font is very tiny.
But our love for all of those people is grand. So thank you, everyone, for that support. And, of course, thank you to everyone who joined us here for the stream, including Alex. Thank you for being with us.
It's a pleasure.
Always a pleasure
always.
Having you and getting to see you on air, along with Trevor. Always great to chat and see you as well.
Yeah, of course, and sorry again for some of the background noise during parts of today. Yeah, but thanks everyone for joining us.
Yes, and a reminder, because it's SpaceX, it's already been delayed, but there is a Starlink launch tonight out of the Cape, currently scheduled for no earlier than 10:56 p.m. Eastern Time.
Sweet.
Yes, it's already delayed. So hopefully...
That's almost 5 a.m. here.
Hopefully some of you guys will rejoin us again for that launch later tonight. Now, as much fun as this has been, it's time for me to go suffer. I have been your host, Sawyer Rosenstein. Wish me luck and my team luck, but thank you everybody for watching, and we'll head on over to Starbase Live and we'll take a look at Ship 26 and all of that, and I will go back to my suffering. Thanks everyone for watching NSF Live.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers, fly! Yes! Echo down to nominal.
Flight downside FD off. Bring in FD off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Look at that! Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go. Indeed. We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?